The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 19. In-Laws and Straws. Still mid-April, 1996.
If he can see inside of my head, why am I unable to see inside his?
Voldemort was sitting up in bed, Nagini curled against him. Wormtail had just woken him to share this most unpleasant and unexpected news.
"I do not know, my lord. I'm uncertain how it happened, exactly,"
answered Wormtail nervously. Voldemort appeared lost in thought for a moment.
"You've done well, Wormtail, and you say you think that he's close with your old friend, Sirius Black."
"Yes, my lord."
"I see."
Wormtail had told him about the rumours of how Sirius Black had turned to the dark side and killed his old friend Peter in the street, before being carted away to Azkaban. It was how Pettigrew had managed to avoid punishment after the Potters' deaths. Sirius Black had not been his disciple. Sirius's cousin Bellatrix was, of course, one of his closest and best deputies, and his brother Regulus had been an excellent Death Eater despite his young age. A bit of a shame about Regulus. None of the other Death Eaters could explain what had happened to him, though Voldemort supposed he was dead. Otherwise, Regulus would have been one of the first to answer his summons. Voldemort had to assume that he was captured and killed by some Order or Ministry types, who had kept the news under wraps, perhaps hoping to lure more of Voldemort's Death Eaters into the same trap. He knew that Sirius had escaped from Azkaban, but he assumed, like many, that the wizard had gone underground, left England entirely. Now, it sounded as though the Potter boy knew him quite well, and had spent time with him. How very interesting.
"Well, let us get everyone together to discuss our strategy tomorrow evening. I think the time will come when our little friend will have something to see inside his head."
And that is how a trap for Harry Potter was set, when the young wizard had no idea to expect a trap. It was to be a simple snare, but one that he would walk directly into, and he would bring his friends. The next afternoon, still mid-April, 1996. Richard's Lucius mobile rang. He groaned. It was the absolute worst timing. Linda's parents were on their way to visit from Cornwall, and if there was one thing that Heathcliff and Octavia Cavendish did not care for, it was changing plans at the last minute. In all actuality, Richard grumbled to himself, there were many things that Heathcliff and Octavia Cavendish did not care for. Anyone forgetting for a moment that they were very distantly related to the Queen, lifting one's saucer with one's teacup whilst drinking tea, their daughter's husband, Richard Granger, all things heartily disliked and barely tolerated by Heathcliff and Octavia Cavendish. But these grumblings about his in-laws were done privately by Richard, to himself, in the privacy of the water-closet, because Linda felt that sunshine streamed out of every orifice of both of her parents. There was nothing for it. If there was to be a meeting tonight, he could not go. He would just need to get the crib notes from Lucius later. He answered the mobile. "Lucius?" There was silence on the other end. He tried again. "Lucius, are you there?" A distant, tinny warbling. Richard held the device away from his ear to check the connection. They were still on the line together. He tried again. "Lucius, place the device near your ear." Richard could barely make out the yelled word, "What?" "By your ear! Put it up to your ear!" There was a shuffling sound. followed by the unmistakable swish of fabric. The garbled, disconnected voice sounded even more muffled. "By your ear! Put it next to your face!" There were more fumbling sounds, and the voice sounded slightly clearer. "What?" "Put the device next to your face! Put it up to your ear! The thing you use to listen!" Finally, mercifully, Lucius's voice came in clearly. "My apologies, Granger. I misheard you when you said ear." "Yes, I could tell," Richard said miserably. "The Dark Lord has summoned us. We must go." "I can't tonight. Please, send my regrets. Call me as soon as you can to let me know exactly what was discussed, all right?" Lucius seemed hesitant. "Are you certain, Granger? Surely whatever you have planned does not supersede—" "Are Narcissa's parents still alive, Lucius?" There was a moment's hesitation before the wizard answered, in an overly formal-sounding voice. "Yes, Druella and Cygnus reside in Belgium." "And when Druella and Cygnus stop by to visit, have you ever cancelled your plans with them at the last minute?" "No, I could never," Lucius answered, seemingly aghast at the very thought. "Precisely. Thankfully, they're like tax day, quite painful to endure, but they only show up once a year," Richard sighed. "And today is that day." "Do you wish I can extract them, to use your phrase for it?" Lucius offered. "I don't mind." No, thank you, Lucius. Not that I haven't had the... No. He finished hurriedly. Linda's frantic voice could be heard shouting for him from the landing outside their bedroom. She got more riled up about her parents visiting than Richard did. "I need to go," Richard said quickly. "I've got to go and clear out a closet so they have a place to hang upside down and sleep." "I understand," Lucius said. "I feel certain that Druella and Cygnus sleep in coffins." Richard nearly laughed, but caught himself, remembering who he was talking to. Lucius, was that a joke?" "Yes." Richard laughed. "Right, then. Call me back after your meeting, no matter the time." He hung up the mobile, just as Linda wrenched the door open, practically pulling it off the hinges. "Who are you talking to?" she asked, with a wild-eyed stare. Lucius." "Never mind. There's no time for explanations. I need you to trim the hedges and paint the letterbox. You know how my father can be." Richard had vivid memories. "Thanks." But dearest, the paint will still be wet when they get here." "He won't touch the letterbox, Richard. Just paint it." Richard shook his head in defeat and headed for the garage for paint. Part of him would rather have 2 tax days a year than have to endure the annual Cavendish visit. The Lucius mobile phone rang what seemed like only minutes after Richard had finally fallen asleep that night. He fumbled, bleary-eyed at his nightstand, finally grasping the tiny mobile device hidden in the tissue box. "Yes?" "We are going next Thursday evening at 6 o'clock to retrieve the prophecy. The Dark Lord was disappointed that you were not able to join us tonight. If I were you, I would make the greatest effort to join us Thursday." "I'll be there. Meet me here Thursday at 5. Linda has yoga again." The line went dead, and Richard placed the phone carefully back in the tissues box. He lay awake for a long time, thinking over what he knew. And unbeknownst to him, Linda lay awake for a long time as well, thinking over what she had heard. The following Thursday, Richard left work early at 4, claiming to have a headache. Back home, he changed quickly into black pants and a long-sleeved black shirt. He felt that, as a Death Eater, he needed to look the part. He had no idea what Death Eaters wore as part of their Death Eater gear. Vaguely he had a mashed-up image of Darth Vader and the Klingons from Star Trek, but he figured he could not go wrong with black. Lucius knocked on the front door promptly at 5. Richard let him in, and with barely a word of nervous greeting, Lucius apparated them both to the Riddle House. Linda had already cleared her Thursday afternoon, and simply waited for her husband to announce that he needed to leave early. When it happened, she smiled and nodded, kissing him on the cheek. Inside, though, she was raging. The taxi was parked just down the block from the Granger home, and from its back seat Linda had a clear view of her front door. It was with surprise, then, that she witnessed not Narcissa coming up the front steps, but Lucius. Linda gasped. What was going on? For as long as she had known her husband, this seemed like the least likely scenario, that he was sneaking around with another man. After 15 minutes, and no reappearance of the two men, Linda's resolve gave out. She paid the taxi driver for his time, and hurried up her front steps, bursting in the door, expecting... well, she didn't know what to expect. What she found was nothing. No sign of either man. They had to have disappeared magically. Linda dressed for yoga slowly, lost in thought. What exactly was going on? The Riddle House, as it often was lit dimly. Candles were spaced intermittently about the room, with 2 candelabras placed to either side of the makeshift throne that the Dark Lord had created. Richard wondered briefly for the 100th time why wizards didn't use electricity.
"We are gathered to prepare for your mission this evening. I trust you all know the assignment."
There were silent nods all round. Richard, seated close by the man, decided it was best to stay silent until addressed.
"Yes, by tonight all secrets shall be revealed. We will know what Dumbledore has hidden all of these years. A drink, then, to our good fortune, and for our continued good luck."
Voldemort turned to Lucius.
"Lucius, will you make my drink?"
Lucius stood importantly and marched away, gesturing to his friend Tiberius not to assist him. Evidently, Richard thought, this was part of their pre-raid ritual.
"So, Cousin Richard, tell me, how is it that you were raised as a Muggle, when your parentage is that of a noble line such as the Gaunts?"
Richard, thankfully, had been briefed and prepared for a line of questioning such as this.
"I was an infant when Morfydd was sent away to Azkaban. My Muggle mother knew that he was unusual, different. I believe he kept his magic hidden from her, however, and she wanted nothing to do with the rest of his family. She moved away as quickly as she could when he disappeared."
"And you found him later?"
Richard forced himself to look into the unsettling red eyes.
"Yes. Several years ago I was approached by a man who claimed to know who my father was. He felt that it was a grave injustice that the uncle of the Dark Lord was languishing in prison. He thought I could help free him."
"Who was this man?"
"He was a follower of yours, Regulus Black."
Richard held his breath, hoping the answer would be acceptable to Voldemort. The Order of the Phoenix had chosen this name as his supposed contact with the dark underbelly of the wizarding world. Sirius had said that his brother Regulus firmly believed in the Dark Lord's ideals, and no one had heard from him in a number of years. It was entirely plausible that before he had gone underground, Regulus had sought out Richard, the alleged Gaunt son. Voldemort nodded solemnly.
"Yes, Regulus was a good man. He strongly believed in blood uniting families. I am certain he had the best of intentions."
Richard shivered a bit. From the sinister tone of Voldemort, it was obvious that if Regulus was not already dead, he would be as soon as the Dark Lord found him. Lucius approached with a drink for Voldemort.
"Is it the kind that I like?"
The Dark Lord asked Lucius with the sudden change in mood of a petulant toddler, looking at the drink doubtfully.
"Yes, my lord."
"Prepared the way I like it?"
"Of course, my lord. It had been shaken, not stirred, but I told him he was doing it wrong, and I fixed it."
Lucius gave Voldemort a small smile and extended the glass, filled with a frothy orange-coloured liquid. Voldemort still looked uncertain. He turned to Richard.
"As my esteemed guest, I would be honoured if you were to try it first."
Richard stared. He recognized the test, not just of himself, but of Lucius's loyalties. His eyes flicked to Lucius, who gave him the slightest of nods. Wonderful, Richard thought. He was going to have to put his life and all of his trust in his tenuous friendship with Lucius Malfoy. He took a deep breath, then reached into the breast pocket of his black Oxford shirt. He withdrew a wrapped straw from McDonald's, left over from when he met Narcissa there. He was careful to act natural, to not appear as though he was looking over to see the reaction of Voldemort. It was a calculated risk. He had seen a similar straw sticking out of the pocket of the Dark Lord when they had visited before at Voldemort's re-emergence. He had noticed how protective of the straw that Voldemort had seemed to be that night. Clearly, it was of some sort of importance to the man, but Richard wasn't sure of what. Was it meant to be a symbol of domination over Muggles? Commentary on the evils of capitalism and consumerism? A tongue-in-cheek juxtaposition of the menace of magical might with the most mundane and mediocre of Muggle merchandising? Voldemort eyed Richard's straw carefully. He watched as Richard peeled the paper meticulously from it and withdrew the straw slowly, as though withdrawing an enchanted sword from a mythical stone.
"You know of the noble house of MacDonald, then?"
he asked Richard sharply.
"Yes."
A slow grin spread across the wicked face of Voldemort.
"Yes."
He withdrew the vaunted straw from his inner pocket, waving it carefully in the air, in measured shapes. Richard, his eyes never leaving Voldemort's, pushed his straw purposefully into the orange drink. He cleared his throat.
"Let us toast to burger and better things in the future."
Then, taking the drink from Lucius, he sipped purposefully from the straw. The room, which was already quiet, grew deathly silent. Everyone, it seemed, was holding their breath to see Voldemort's reaction. There was a gasp from Voldemort. Then, amazingly, the darkest of dark wizards spun his straw carefully in his long, pale fingers. Slowly, he pushed one end of the straw into the frothy orangeness. He leaned forward, eyes still on Richard's. Then he pursed his lips around the straw and sucked. The look of unadulterated joy on Voldemort's face was startling.
"Extraordinary! Absolutely extraordinary!"
The Dark Lord took the drink in hand and raised it as, around the room, others did the same. "Did you say burger and better things?" Lucius whispered, leaning towards Richard.
"No, you must have misheard me."
Chapter 20. Jealousies and Journeys. A bit earlier the same evening. Bellatrix, meanwhile, was fuming mad. The old elf creature seemed to be acting purposefully obstinate. She was unable to recall the exact location of her old Aunt Walburga's home, Black Manor, a sure sign that the home was now unplottable, and protected by a Fidelius charm. So she had done the next best thing. She had called Creature to her. "And you'll make sure the house is empty when Potter tries to get in touch with his dear godfather Sirius."
"If you wish it, mistress."
"Yes, I very much wish it, you filthy little creature."
"It's Creature, mistress."
"I don't care about your name, elf. Just do as I say. Do you understand me?"
"Okie dokie."
Creature had heard the phrase somewhere, and had liked the sound of it. He'd decided to adopt it as his own.
"Okie what?"
Your wish is my command, mistress."
Creature corrected himself quickly.
"That's more like it. Yes. Once we retrieve the prophecy tonight, the Dark Lord will ascend to new heights. He will rise up and stand tall among all men and creatures, great and small."
Bellatrix grinned maniacally.
"Is that a short elf joke?" Creature asked with a stern glint in his gaze.
Bellatrix's smile dropped, and she pursed her lips. She raised a hand as though to smack the impertinence out of Creature's mouth. But the elf, chastised, snapped his fingers and popped back to Black Manor.
"That elf always was an asshole,"
muttered Bellatrix as she twisted on the spot, focused on her own destination, Riddle House. Bellatrix swept into the room, a gracious and self-satisfied smile upon her face.
"It is done, my lord!"
She stopped suddenly, gaze fixed upon the unknown man seated to Voldemort's left. Voldemort's long, pale fingers held the stem of a frothy, creamy orange drink in a Poco Grande glass. Extending from the top of the glass were 2 straws, one reaching towards her lord, and the other to this stranger. The 2 men leaned together as though sharing a secret. It almost looked as though she'd walked in on a date from a bygone era, 2 teenagers sharing a milkshake in one of those Muggle diners that Uncle Alphard had once taken Bellatrix and her sisters to.
"Is that an orange creamsicle? I thought that was our drink."
Bellatrix frowned petulantly.
"I was not aware we had a drink, Bellatrix."
Voldemort's high, cold voice fell over her like an icy ocean wave. She shuddered, but persisted.
"Well, apparently I'm not aware of a lot of things. Who is this, my lord?"
Voldemort sighed. Now, it seemed, was the time to introduce his long-lost relative to the group.
"This is my cousin, Richard. His father was my uncle, of the pure-blood Gaunt family, a part of the Sacred 28. He was raised by his Muggle mother, but he has come to claim his rightful place at the side of Lord Voldemort."
Bellatrix's eyes widened, then narrowed. After a moment, she finally found her voice.
"Richard, you say?"
"Yes,"
said Voldemort, with the first hint of a tiny smile, enjoying this tug-of-war display that Bellatrix was starting up. But Richard was having none of it.
"And who might you be?"
he asked with a neutral expression. Voldemort smiled for real this time. It pleased him to know that his blood relative could hold his own against Voldemort's most trusted follower.
"Who might I be? Who might I be?"
Bellatrix crossed the room quickly, gathering her skirts in one hand and withdrawing her wand with the other. She placed it just below the man's chin, pushing the tip of it into the skin of his neck. He held her gaze coolly. "I am your worst enemy. I am the thing you fear when you go to bed at night. I am the most loyal, the most ardent, the most fervent supporter of our Dark Lord." "Well, that's rather a long title to put on a calling card," Richard quipped. There were a few titters around the room. Lucius appeared to gulp down the laugh that bubbled in his throat.
"Sit down, Bellatrix,"
Voldemort said, mildly. When the witch did not comply, he sent a lazy stinging hex at her feet. She turned her wild gaze upon him, but realized her mistake immediately. She cast down her eyes and bowed to him. "As you wish, my lord. A chair!" When no one brought her a chair, she turned to the opposite side of the room. With a quick swipe of her wand, Mulciber was knocked from his seat, and his chair zoomed to her. She sat directly in front of Voldemort. He crooked a finger and pointed at the space of floor to his right. She huffed and moved her chair to it. From her new position in the room, she eyeballed this Richard character beadily. Was this the new challenger to her position, then, not the child that Voldemort had fathered, as she thought? Lucius had said that the invader had been raising the Dark Lord's child, but perhaps it wasn't the child she needed to worry about just yet. Voldemort was explaining his plan for obtaining the prophecy.
"And so I think a team of 12 will be best,"
he was saying. When he was done talking, he struggled a moment with lining up the straw with his mouth, then finally succeeded. He sucked up the last bit of orange creamsicle, then withdrew the straw from the glass, vanishing it wandlessly. From the Dark Lord's left, the Muggle man made a small noise. Voldemort turned to him.
"Do you not agree, Richard?"
"Well, it's not my place to say."
"Then shut up," Bellatrix began, but her words were drowned out by Voldemort's.
"Of course it is. You are my cousin. The blood rivers of our family run deep."
Bellatrix could feel her anger surging through the blood rivers of her own veins at that proclamation.
"Well, in my experience with missions like this, a smaller team usually works better. You say all we have to do is convince this boy to pick up this prophecy and hand it to one of us."
Bellatrix let out a shrill bark of laughter.
"You think it will be so simple? You think Dumbledore's chosen one will just hand it over?"
"Maybe if we ask nicely." More muffled laughs from around the room.
"It's not just that. The more people you go in with, the more chances of mistakes, and the greater chance that more of us will be captured."
Voldemort was lost in thought for a moment. Finally he said,
"How many, then, do you suppose?"
"Why not just me and Lucius?" "There is no way you are leaving me out of this!"
seethed Bellatrix. The Dark Lord considered for a moment.
"All right, just the 3 of you."
Richard smiled thinly at her.
"Looks like we're a trio, then."
"My lord, I must insist," began one of the other men nearby. Bellatrix turned swiftly. Antonin Dolohov was on his feet.
Fine, the 4 of you,"
Voldemort said, waving his hand holding his straw lazily. Then he appeared to notice the red, yellow, and white object in his hand once more.
"Richard, as you do not have a wand, perhaps you can use—"
and he extended the straw to the Muggle.
"Oh, that's too kind. I
insist. Bellatrix, clean this."
Voldemort held out the straw in her direction now, the straw that he had once told her not to contaminate with her filth. Bellatrix took the straw,
pleased to see how much the Dark Lord trusted her with it. There was still a chance for the two of them, then. She locked eyes with him, focusing on the red orbs intently with her gaze. Her tongue darted out, licking along the sides of the straw, all the while fixing him with her best "kiss me" expression on her face. Then she wrapped her lips around the end of the straw and sucked fiercely. Voldemort's upper lip curled back in disgust. "Bellatrix, that's revolting. Use a Scourgify," Voldemort said sternly. Chastised, her hot gaze turned cold instantly.
The last OWL examination had finally arrived. History of Magic. No one felt very well prepared, with the possible exception of Hermione, who made it her business to devour every history book that the old ghost Professor Binns ever mentioned. Still, Draco couldn't complain. Because of their ordinarily lengthy, but occasionally cut short by a bit of snogging in the stacks, study sessions, more than just the smell of Hermione's perfume had rubbed off on him. He felt as prepared as he could be. But the examination schedule had taken its toll on several students. The matron, Madame Pomfrey, had already administered several calming draughts to numerous fifth-years. Blaise, Theo, and Pansy had taken to chain-smoking lavender cigarettes in the dungeon loo, and Hannah Abbott had somehow transfigured everyone's teacups at breakfast that morning into tarantulas, resulting in a small but controlled panic as Professors McGonagall and Snape vanished them. Draco was finishing up his final answer on the exam when it happened. Potter had allowed exhaustion to overtake him, and he had passed out, asleep over his examination parchment. Had he simply stayed asleep, no one would have noticed. Instead, the twit sat up, screaming about dogs and mysteries and you-know-who. This caused the second panic of the day as he was ushered out. Draco noticed as the examiner helped Potter from the room that both Hermione and Potter's friend Ron Weasley had worried looks on their faces. Both of them turned in their examination papers quickly and followed Potter. After a moment's indecision and annoyance, Draco did the same. Out in the entrance hall, Hermione and the two Gryffindor wizards were nowhere to be seen. Draco scanned around, finally spotting a flash of brown curls disappearing from the first-floor landing above him. As he hurried up the stairs, a voice called from below, "Oi, Malfoy! What's got your knickers bunched thin?" The lilting voice of Ginny Weasley, coming in from her Care of Magical Creatures class, waylaid him. He turned back to the fourth-year Gryffindor. Whilst he tolerated Ron, and generally got along all right with the twins, both of whom had become friends with Theo over the years, he genuinely sort of liked the only girl Weasley. She seemed to have inherited the most brains of any of them, as well as the fastest-thinking mouth. He told her quickly what had happened. She narrowed her eyes. "Well, let's go find them." With every Floo passage but the one in Umbridge's office being monitored, Harry did not see another way around it. They would need to go into her office to confirm what he had seen in his dream. But Hermione really didn't like the idea. "What about an owl? Or we can speak with one of the other professors. Madame Pomfrey?" Yes, she was grasping at straws, but she had to do something. Harry was working himself into a panic, and Ron was doing nothing to help. She needed to be the voice of reason. This dream had been simply that, a dream. No one was waiting for Harry in the Department of Mysteries, for Godric's sake. But he would not be deterred. After a few moments of discussion in front of the library on the second floor, the three of them were joined by Ginny and Draco. "What's happened?" Draco asked quickly. "None of your business," Ron said swiftly. Ever since Draco had been assigned to the inquisitorial squad that past autumn, Ron had become increasingly suspicious of Draco. "Hush, Ron," said Ginny. "Harry, what's happened?" As Harry was too distracted, Hermione filled them in on what Harry had supposedly seen, and what his plan was. "We need lookouts," Harry interjected. Apparently he had been formulating a plan as they spoke. "If we're using Umbridge's office, we need to know if she's coming."
"Malfoy and I can do that," Ginny replied. "The signal will be jingle bells."
"I don't think Malfoy needs to be—" Ron started, but Ginny interrupted.
"Good thing nobody asked you to think, then," responded Ginny.
"Right. Ron, you go find Umbridge. Feed her a story. Anything. Peeves is tearing up the Transfigurations classroom. Some Hufflepuffs have set fire to the library. Whatever." Harry ran his hands through his hair, exposing the lightning scar. To his credit, Ron simply nodded at his friend and hurried away. "Come on," Harry said, grabbing Hermione's wrist. She did not miss the fleeting look of jealousy that passed across Draco's face. They dashed to the door of Umbridge's office, and Harry withdrew a knife from his pocket, sliding it into the lock. The door opened onto a pink nightmare. Plush pink upholstery covered every seating surface, and manic kittens gamboled sinisterly around the room, on pink porcelain plates affixed to the wall. It looked like something a 6-year-old would design, and knowing that it had been chosen by a fully grown adult gave Hermione the heebie-jeebies. Having seen it before in detentions numerous times, Harry ignored it all, instead going directly to the fireplace and tossing in a pinch of green powder. 12 Grimmauld Place. He pushed his head into the flames, and the upper half of his body disappeared. Hermione sat back to fret and wait. A few moments later, vague singing could be heard in the corridor outside. "Harry!" she called, but he did not seem to hear. She tugged on his robes to no avail. "Harry!" The singing grew louder, then abruptly stopped. The office door practically burst off its hinges. Professor Umbridge stood in the doorway, holding Ron's ear in one hand and his wand in the other. Behind her, Draco had Ginny in front of him. His and Ginny's wands pointed vaguely at her, a wide-eyed expression on his face.
"So, you sent a moronic Weasley to lie to my face about the filthy poltergeist destroying a classroom. But I just came from the astronomy tower, where the very same poltergeist was destroying the telescopes."
Umbridge pushed Ron further into the room in front of her and stalked to the fireplace. She reached to where Harry's head would be. After groping around for a moment, she grabbed Harry by the hair and yanked him up.
"Draco, disarm them!"
Umbridge screamed. Harry and Hermione held out their wands to the blonde wizard who, not knowing what else to do, took them. He held them in his right hand with his own and Ginny's wands.
"Then you have another Weasley stationed as a lookout, not even realizing that the head of my inquisitorial squad was only a short distance away."
Umbridge gestured at Draco, who looked as though he was sizing up the whole situation carefully.
"Now,"
Umbridge turned her beady little stare upon Harry, "who were you trying to contact?" There was a forceful blast from behind Umbridge, and Harry, Hermione, and the 2 Weasleys turned in shock to see Draco pointing all 4 of the wands at the toad-like professor's back. With a wide-eyed, shocked expression, Umbridge fell unceremoniously onto her face on the floor. Perhaps not with all 4 wands next time," Harry said uncertainly. Draco hummed as though pondering an academic question. "Do you think she's dead?" Hermione asked nervously. "Do we care if she's dead?" Ginny wondered. "Never mind all that. Did you talk to Sirius?" Ron asked, for once the voice of reason. "No," Harry said, back on track. "Creature says that he isn't there. No one else was either, apparently. This confirms it. The Dark Lord has him at the Department of Mysteries."
"Harry, don't you think it's possible that this is just a trap?" Hermione asked. "After all, you do have a known tendency to want to rescue people you care about."
The dark-haired wizard turned an angry gaze upon her.
What do you mean by that?"
Not in a bad way," Hermione explained hurriedly. "It's just, well, the Chamber of Secrets with Ginny, and wanting to believe the best in Sirius. The Triwizard Tournament with that little girl."
"Yeah, thanks for the vote of confidence," Harry snarled. "Hold on, Potter. There's no need for you to be an asshole. She's only trying to help," Draco began, but he was cut off by Ginny. "Listen, while you two gits are fighting this out, Sirius could be dying," she pointed out. "Ginny's right. I'm going to the Minister of Magic, and—"
"Harry, no!"
Hermione protested as Ron talked over her. "I'm going too." Ginny added, "I'm coming as well." Draco sighed and spoke up. "Have any of you actually been to the bottom floors of the Ministry of Magic before? Do you know the closest flue point?"
Ron looked uncertainly at the others.
"No, but I'm sure we can—"
"Are you volunteering to show us?" Harry asked quickly.
"Draco!"
Hermione locked eyes with him. This wasn't a good idea, she tried to tell him, but she could already see that he had made up his mind.
"I'll help you."
"Salazar helped me, but I'll do it."
"Why?"
asked Ron in a wary tone. Draco sighed and rubbed his temples. Noticing that he still held 3 of their wands, he offered them back to the others. Ron picked up his wand from the ground near Umbridge's hand.
"Because, as much as I would prefer to sit all this out and not have to take a side, I have a feeling that isn't possible any more. Hermione's choosing your side, and I'm choosing hers."
Hermione's concerns and misgivings abated for a moment as the meaning of Draco's words washed over her. Her stomach felt as though it had been suddenly invaded by a kaleidoscope of butterflies. Ginny raised one eyebrow and smirked.
"Well, that was swoon-worthy, Malfoy."
"Shut up, Gin," Ron grumbled.
"Fine. You can come, Malfoy, but watch yourself, because I'll be watching you. One wrong move, yeah, I'll be vomiting slugs for days. Got it?"
Draco waved a hand dismissively.
"Right, so the Ministry Visitors' entrance is about 4 blocks from the Standard Hotel. I think that's the closest flue point, then. We can count on being open right now. I know the bloke who works in the office where the flue is located. He won't bat an eye to us coming through."
Draco stepped through the flue at the Standard and gave a quick salute to Basil Fawlty, who sat at his desk, opening his post with a sharp letter-opener. In Basil's surprise at the sudden intrusion, the letter-opener slipped and cut the man's arm. As the others stepped through the flue, the cut grew steadily worse, with blood now streaming across his desk blotter.
"Oh, Merlin, Basil, sorry about that. Are you all right?"
Draco asked. By now, the other 4 had pushed through the flue and were staring agape at the bloodied man.
"'Tis but a scratch,"
Basil said determinedly, turning white from shock.
"A scratch? Your arm's off?"
Ron said queasily, looking rather pale himself. Though Basil's arm was still entirely attached, the cut did look quite awful.
"Can I fix it for you?"
Hermione asked urgently.
"Yes,"
whispered Basil. When the healing was done, the skin unblemished once more, and the blood vanished, Hermione said,
"There you are. Not even a flesh wound any more."
"I'm forever grateful, miss,"
Basil intoned. Basil was a squib, Draco knew, and would have had a hard time healing the cut.
"Off to enjoy an evening in London, then? Jolly good."
The group nodded and smiled, and managed to leave the office rather quickly. "What an odd man," Harry said. "Was that a dead parrot in that cage in the corner?"
"Yes,"
whispered Draco and Ginny at the same time. As the telephone booth lowered into the ground, holding its 5 squished occupants, Draco wondered for easily the 1000th time in the last hour what he thought he was doing. This wasn't his fight, and if it was, He wasn't on the same side as the rest of his family, he felt sure. He pointed the way to the inconspicuous door at the end of the corridor, deep in the underbelly of the Ministry of Magic. His father had pointed out this very door every time they had come downstairs to the Wizengamot when he was younger. "Yes, just like I saw it," Potter breathed. "You've never been here, Harry?" Hermione reminded him. She and Draco exchanged nervous looks. Truthfully, this was neither of their fights, and yet here they were, backing up a wizard who had funny dreams about places he'd never been, and who appeared to be spoiling for a fight with the darkest wizard of the modern age. Through the door, into the spinning chamber, through door after door, Draco's misgivings grew. How would they find their way out of this labyrinth? "This is it! This is the room! The Hall of Prophecies!" Harry finally exclaimed as they opened the door to a room filled with glittering glass spheres. "We just need to find row 97. Dutifully, the four of them followed the dark-haired wizard. "Here! They should be here." But no one was there. No Sirius Black begging for his life. No Voldemort holding him at wand point. "They should be here," Potter said plaintively. "But they're not," Draco replied with an edge to his voice. Salazar Sack. Why had he allowed this situation to progress? He should have been at the after-finals party in the Slytherin common room. His biggest concern tonight should have been trying to work out whether or not Hermione might join him in a quiet corner for a bit of post-examination snogging. Not whatever the hell this was.
"Sirius isn't here, but I think someone else is," Hermione said.
"What makes you say that?" Weasley asked nervously.
"Maybe she's got a sixth sense about these things,"
said a woman's voice from the shadows.
Red hair, robes too short. Must be a Weasley."
The woman stepped out of the nearby shadows, her wild eyes roaming over the five of them.
"Let's see who else we have. Ah, a girl Weasley, too. And the chosen one, of course. And is that Draco?"
At these final words, the woman's voice changed from a knowing drawl to flummoxed shock. Draco stared wild-eyed at the woman. He knew her from the photograph in the Daily Prophet. His mother's sister, Bellatrix. Had Narcissa known she was back all along? It had been months since Bellatrix's escape with the others from Azkaban. Where had they been hiding? And how had she gotten here? All of these questions fell from his mind, however, as soon as the other three men stepped from the shadows behind Bellatrix. Draco refocused his attention, blinked hard, and looked again. It was impossible. "Father! Mr. Granger!" he called hoarsely. At the same time, next to him, Hermione whispered in disbelief, "Dad?" Chapter 21. Mysteries and Missiles.
"Well, isn't this a cozy family reunion?"
the crazy woman called Bellatrix said from in front of him. It had taken Richard a moment to collect his thoughts when he saw the young brigade of teens trooping around the corner of row 96 and into the faint, dim glow of row 97. He'd spent the last hour or so working out how best to go about winning over the young wizard enough to give him the prophecy, and for him to then accidentally on purpose destroy it. He had not counted on Harry Potter showing up with the crew, and he certainly had not counted on that crew including his daughter and her friend Draco. "Draco, what are you doing here?" Lucius seethed next to him. Clearly this was as much a surprise to Lucius
as it was to Richard. But it was Hermione who spoke.
"Harry saw his friend being tortured. He came to rescue him. We were with him when it happened, so we came along."
"That's excellent," Richard said, quickly cutting his daughter off before she went into more details. "So, Harry, if you will just—"
"Don't butt in!"
the wild-haired witch screamed at him.
"I'm not butting in. I'm trying to get this mission finished before the authorities arrive," Richard answered sardonically. "But if you want to hang around and get arrested, by all means take forever."
As the two of them faced off against each other, the fourth member of their team, the late addition Dolohov, started towards the group of teenagers. He made as though to grab Hermione, who was closest. Swiftly, Richard removed the straw given to him by Voldemort from his shirt pocket. He had gone to the Riddle house that night with a small collection of objects from his private room in his cellar. It was true he did have a small pistol strapped to his ankle, but he had no plans to use it. A gun wasn't necessary, surely. They were going to collect what was essentially a bauble from a teenager, after all. But Richard was not a man who left many things to chance, if he could help it. Inside the tiny kit that he had packed was a variety of useful devices. There was a flashbang, miniature night vision binoculars, a small switchblade disguised as a package of gum, and 3 tiny tranquilizer darts. Ordinarily, these were shot with a dart gun, but the gun had been too large and obtrusive, so Richard had brought them along in case he could throw them. Not quite as effective or accurate, unfortunately, but it helped that he and Hermione had spent many evenings in their back garden, playing darts and bocce. The straw, however, was the perfect size. So as they had waited there in the darkness on aisle 97, Richard had surreptitiously preloaded a dart into the straw chamber, as it were. One could never be too prepared, especially when accompanied by loose cannons like the Death Eaters. This proved fortuitous, as Dolohov made to manhandle his daughter into submission. That would not stand. He swiftly raised the straw to his lips and blew hard. The dart struck directly in the tall, brutish man's jugular. The dark-haired man put his hand up to his neck, knocking loose the dart which rolled under a shelf. A look of shock passed across his face before he fell hard to the ground. Bellatrix rounded in astonishment to stare at Richard. But it was Lucius who spoke up. "We cannot hurt the girl. You know who she is," Lucius said meaningfully to Bellatrix.
"Fine," Bellatrix snarled. "Just get the prophecy."
"Potter, we need you to pick up the prophecy and hand it to us," Lucius said smoothly, turning to the dark-haired teen. "And why the hell would I do that?" the boy said, his eyes darting around wildly. Richard was worried. He knew the Potter boy was smart, but according to Hermione, he sometimes acted first and thought later. Now was not the time for heroics. He had heard a bit from Lucius about Bellatrix Lestrange, and had read the articles about her in the Daily Prophet, which he had continued having delivered to the house, even as Hermione had returned to school. From the way she was described there, she was one who acted first, and thought possibly never. He stepped forward, leaving Lucius and Bellatrix behind him.
"Harry, I'm not sure we've met. I'm Richard Granger, Hermione's father."
"Why are you working with them?" the red-haired wizard asked. He reminded Richard a bit of Arthur Weasley, now that he looked at the boy properly. Hermione had said Harry's best friend was a Weasley. But Richard ignored him, focusing his attention on Harry.
"Look, Harry, we're all on the same side here. There is knowledge to be found in this prophecy, yes? Wouldn't you like answers as well? After all, the prophecy is about you, too."
Richard and the members of the Order had been told by Dumbledore the gist of what this thing said. It truly didn't sound very useful to Richard, but, not being a wizard, perhaps he didn't fully understand. Essentially,
The only new information that Voldemort likely didn't have was that either he or Harry would need to die at the hands of the other. But Voldemort already seemed determined to kill the boy, and from the way Hermione, Sirius, and Lobo talked, the feeling was mutual. The entirety of the Order had vowed to do what they could to help Harry kill Voldemort when the time came. Still, the less information Voldemort had, the better. Best to destroy this thing and everyone go home alive, than for his daughter and her friends to risk their lives for a useless record of a prophecy.
"Yeah, I would like to know," Harry said. "Harry, don't!" the Weasley boy said. "Harry!" Richard locked eyes with the young wizard. He widened his eyes and, without moving his head, looked to his right at the slumped body of Antonin Dolohov. Then he looked back at Harry, locking his stare upon the boy's green eyes. "I'm on your side," he thought. "Please trust me." He knew there was no way to tell this boy this, other than with his gaze. Hesitantly, the scarred wizard reached up for the prophecy. Richard could sense Lucius taking a step closer to him, and he held out a hand as though to stop the man. "I've got this," he called over his shoulder. He gave an imperceptible nod to Harry. Harry took the glass orb from the shelf, holding it carefully, reading the tag on it. Richard stepped forward, his back to the two Death Eaters. He held out his left hand, his right hand digging into the concealed pouch inside his waistband, looking hard at Hermione now. Using his body to shield the view from Lucius and Bellatrix, he put the flashbang in Hermione's hands. "Hit the bull's-eye," he whispered through clenched teeth. He felt the glass ball fall softly into the palm of his hand, at the same moment that Hermione winded up discreetly to throw the device directly at Bellatrix. Within 2 seconds the room began filling with light and smoke, as the device bounced off the older witch's skirt. Lucius fell forward to the ground from the concussion of the blast. The red-haired girl, who Richard sensed had been looking for an opportunity to join the fray, stepped forward and stomped hard on Lucius's outstretched hands with her boot heel. There was a muffled but unmistakable crunch of broken bones. With the older Malfoy's hand injured, it was the perfect foil for his next step. "Lucius, catch!" Richard lobbed the glass sphere forcefully, purposefully a few inches short of Lucius's fingertips. Everyone, minus the unconscious Dolohov, watched in horror and fascination as the glass shattered on the ground. Pearlescent ghostly figures rose from the shards, their voices drowned out by the yells from Bellatrix and the Weasley boy. Richard took the opportunity of the momentary distraction and turned back to Hermione, Harry, and Draco. "Get everyone out! Now! Hurry!" he urged quietly, and Draco nodded. He turned back to Bellatrix and Lucius. "Let's go!" he yelled. "With all this noise, the authorities will be on their way." Bellatrix turned on her brother-in-law. "Lucius, you imbecile! How could you drop that?" Then she looked up at the retreating crowd of teenagers. "They're getting away!" She fired a stream of green light from her wand, only to be yanked to the ground by Lucius. "That's my son with them, you stupid bitch!" Lucius began. "And the Dark Lord's daughter. You, of all people, should care about that. And you know the Dark Lord wishes to kill Potter himself." "So you're just letting them go?" she cried in anger. "What choice do we have?" Richard said bitterly. "Clearly, Hermione and Draco are trying to infiltrate Potter's circle of trust. At least Potter didn't get to hear the prophecy, either." "And what was that thing she threw at me?" Bellatrix fumed. "No idea," Richard said with feigned confusion.
Hermione's mind was buzzing with questions as the five of them raced back through the numerous doors and into the circular spinning room.
"Which way is the way out? Where is the exit?"
Ginny screamed, and just like that, a door in the miasma of portals opened. With quick, incredulous looks at each other, the five of them barreled through, Draco and then Harry bringing up the rear. They raced for the nearest flue, praying that Umbridge had not woken up and locked it from the other side. Luck was with them, and the five of them stepped out of the grate, back into the pink purgatory that was this crazed witch's office. At the sound of them entering, she began stirring a bit, and Harry and Ron both sent stunning spells her way.
"What shall we do with her?"
asked Ron, breathlessly. A mischievous smirk played across Draco's features. "Let me handle it," he said, tapping on his Inquisitorial Squad badge. "I need some answers now," Harry began, but he was stopped by Ginny.
"One issue at a time," she said. "Besides, if this hag can hear us—"
Harry nodded tensely and clamped his teeth together. After a minute or so of uncomfortable silence, Theo and Blaise arrived.
"Where do you want her?"
Theo said, cracking his knuckles comically, looking down at Umbridge. "What?" asked Harry in confusion, whilst at the same time Ginny asked,
"How's your parcel tongue? Harry can open the chamber for you." "Ginny!"
said Harry and Hermione together. Said Draco, as though he was considering it.
"The Forbidden Forest?" suggested Ron. "Plenty of scary shite in there." "Now you're talking, Ickle Ronnikins!"
The familiar voice of George Weasley, or Fred, Hermione still occasionally had a hard time telling them apart, said from the doorway.
"What are you two doing here?"
Ron looked up in surprise at his older twin brothers.
"Not ran into us on his way here. Said we might be interested in helping out," the second twin said. "And after this old hag had us removed from the team in our last Quidditch season for some bullshit reason." "Since when do you have to have at least 4 OWLs to play in 7th year?"
George / the other one groused.
"Since when are the three of you friends?" Ron asked, mystified. "We're not just friends," Theo boasted. "We're going to be business partners come September."
"What do you mean?" Harry asked.
"Well, George and I are planning to open a joke shop in Diagon, and Theo here has agreed to back us."
"How?" asked Hermione in confusion.
"I turn 17 on September 6th, and I'll control my inheritance from my mother then. The Foley coffers need to diversify."
Draco laughed.
"You're doing this to piss off Tiberius." Theo smirked. "Let's see him try to ignore me when we open Knott's Nefarious Notions." "Fred and I have already told you that's not the name, Knott." "What are you going to call it?" Ginny asked. "Weasley's Wizard Wheezes," said George.
"What's your second choice?" Blaise asked, wrinkling his nose in distaste.
"Weasley's Wizard Wheezes," said Fred more sternly.
"Yeah, that's fine,"
agreed Blaise. "So, where are we bringing this?" asked Theo, stooping to check that Umbridge was still out. "It's getting late. The Slytherin party is in full swing, and there's a hot Ravenclaw I'm supposed to be meeting."
"Forest works for me," said Blaise, as the twins nodded.
"Let's just," George said as he waved his wand at the frolicking kitten plates, vanishing them quickly. "That's better." "And we'll just take these back," said Fred, summoning his and George's broomsticks that Umbridge had confiscated. "Right. We're ready when you are, Snakes."
Theo and Blaise pointed their wands at Umbridge, lifting her upright into a vertical stance, where she slumped toadishly. They pointed their wands, levitating her into the corridor. "How do you feel about Zabini's zany zingers?"
"Sounds clunky,"
a twin said, as the four of them moved down the passageway to the stairs.
Zabini's zealous zeitgeist,
the Slytherin offered.
"You open a shop and call it that,"
challenged the other twin. The 5 people remaining in Umbridge's office were quiet for a minute, before Harry turned back to the others, shaking his head as though to clear it of the nonsense they had just witnessed. "Okay, I need some answers, and I'd like them now." He turned first to Draco. "Malfoy, did you know your father was going to be there tonight? Did you tip him off that we were coming?" Draco rolled his eyes. "Potter, I didn't even know I was going to go there tonight, much less my father. If you recall, you made the decision to go, and I made the decision to follow you, and then we went. When exactly would I have had time to contact my father?" Harry appeared to consider this, then nodded to himself. He turned next to Hermione. "What about you?"
"What about me?"
she asked defensively.
"What was your father doing there with Death Eaters, Hermione? What do you think he's asking?"
Ginny asked sarcastically.
I don't know,"
she whispered, as she let the memory of the encounter in the Department of Mysteries overtake her once more. Her stomach twisted into knots.
"I really don't know."
"I may have an idea," said Draco reluctantly, and Hermione's eyes flashed to him.
"Did your father imperious him?"
she asked swiftly. "What? No, Hermione. Did he act imperious at all?"
"He helped us back there,"
Ginny said, in awe at the recollection of events.
"He gave you that loud thing to cause a distraction, and, at least from my angle, he threw the prophecy short on purpose. I'm sure of it."
"Which doesn't still answer the question of why was he there in the first place?" Ron said. "Hermione, do you have a way of getting in touch with your dad right now?"
"No,"
she whispered, tears coming to her eyes suddenly as the gravity of the situation hit her.
"I don't know what's going on, and I don't know why my father was there."
A voice from the doorway startled all 5 of them. "Perhaps I will be able to shed light on the situation," drawled Professor Snape.
Thank you for listening to The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. If you enjoyed this and would like to listen to more, please subscribe to me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts at Silver and Copper, or search Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.